Have you ever noticed how some people count down to their birthday like it's a national holiday? They plan for weeks, send reminders, post countdowns. Meanwhile, there's someone else who wakes up on their birthday, makes coffee, and goes about their day like it's just another Tuesday, same date. Completely different emotional worlds. So what separates them? Why do some people celebrate their existence loudly while others let the day pass in silence? It's easy to assume they just don't care. But that's not the full story, because the psychology behind treating your birthday like a normal day is rarely about indifference. It's about protection, it's about pain, it's about peace, and sometimes, it's about all three at once. Let's go deeper. 1. The invisible wound. For some people, birthdays became emotionally expensive a long time ago. Think back to childhood. A young kid sits by the window, wearing their favorite shirt, waiting for friends to arrive. The cake is ready, the balloons are up, but one by one, the excuses come in, and slowly the room stays quiet. That disappointment doesn't just fade, it settles. It teaches. When this happens enough times, the brain makes a dangerous equation. Expectation equals pain, hope equals hurt, excitement equals disappointment. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. It's when repeated letdowns train you to stop trying, to stop hoping, to stop expecting joy because experience taught you it never lasts. So the next year, they don't plan, they don't invite, they don't hope, they emotionally shut down before the disappointment can arrive. And to the outside world, it looks like they don't care. But here's the truth, they care too much. That's why they stop. It's not indifference, it's self-defense. They're not cold, they're just protecting themselves from the warmth that once burned them. 2. The overloaded mind. Then there's another group, not sad, not wounded, just drained. Modern life has turned our brains into constant motion machines. Work emails at midnight, notifications every 5 seconds, deadlines stacking like dominoes. When you're living inside that storm, days blur together. Psychologists call this time compression, the sensation that life is moving faster than you can emotionally process it. When every single day feels like survival mode, birthdays lose their meaning. It's not that they don't want to celebrate, they simply don't have the mental bandwidth for it. Even joy starts to feel like another task on the list. I should do something special, but should become stress, and stress becomes avoidance. This is especially common among high achievers, caregivers, or anyone stuck in the never-ending grind. They suppress self-celebration because their brain equates rest with guilt. For them, a quiet birthday isn't neglect. It's just what happens when you forget how to pause. 3. The self-sufficient soul. But then there's a third type. People who genuinely don't need external celebration, that they know it's their birthday. They feel gratitude. They might even treat themselves to something small. But they don't need balloons and attention to validate their existence. For them, the day isn't a performance, it's a reflection. Psychologists connect this to self-determination theory, which says that true fulfillment comes from autonomy, competence, and inner peace, not from how loudly others applaud you. They've shifted from who's celebrating me to how do I feel about who I've become. That's emotional maturity, the realization that external validation can't replace internal peace. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's contentment. They don't ignore the day, they just live it quietly. Maybe they journal, maybe they take a long walk, maybe they spend time with one person who truly matters, and that's enough. 4. The birthday paradox. Here's where it gets interesting. The people who treat their own birthdays like nothing, they're often the first ones to remember yours. They buy thoughtful gifts, they send heartfelt messages, they remember the small details, others forget why. Because deep down, they know what it feels like to be forgotten. They've built empathy from absence. Their lack of self-celebration isn't a lack of emotion, it's a quiet understanding of how fragile connection really is. That's the paradox. The ones who don't celebrate themselves often carry the deepest emotional intelligence about others. They give what they wish they had received, and in doing so, they make everyone else feel seen, even while they stay invisible. 5. The social performance. Let's talk about something uncomfortable. Social media turned birthdays into public auditions. You post, you wait, you count the notifications, and subconsciously, your brain starts measuring worth in likes and comments. Psychologists call this the comparison trap. When your brain confuses digital applause with real affection, and when someone doesn't get the same flood of attention, the mind registers it as social rejection, even if it's not true, even if people care. The silence feels loud, so some people make a decision, I'd rather not post at all. They withdraw, not because they hate birthdays, but because they hate what birthdays have become. A popularity contest, a performance metric, A scoreboard instead of a celebration. In a world obsessed with broadcasting every emotion, their silence becomes rebellion. 6. The mirror of time. And then there's the weight of time itself. Birthdays don't just mark another year, they force you to confront it, to look back at who you were 12 months ago and measure the gap between expectation and reality. For some, that mirror is uncomfortable. Psychologists call this temporal the moment you evaluate your own timeline, and sometimes, that evaluation stings. Am I where I thought I'd be? Did I grow? Did I waste time? Did I become the person I promised myself I would? When the answers feel uncertain, the birthday stops feeling like celebration. It starts feeling like confrontation, so they avoid it, not because they hate themselves, but because they're still trying to make peace with who they're becoming. Every candle becomes a question they're not ready to answer yet. 7. The quiet rebellion. But here's a different angle. What if treating your birthday like a normal day isn't sadness at all? What if it's evolution? Because the people who don't make a big deal about birthdays often have something others don't. A deeper sense of continuity. They don't wait for one day to feel alive. They find reasons to feel grateful every single day. Their philosophy is simple. Why celebrate existence once a year when you can honor it daily? In a strange way, they've outgrown the need for ritual, not because they reject joy, but because they've learned to integrate it into ordinary moments. The morning coffee, the sunset walk, the quiet conversation, those become their celebrations. And maybe that's not loss, maybe that's growth. 8. What your birthday reveals about you. So, what does your own relationship with birthdays say about you? If you crave celebration, it might mean you recharge through connection. You value being seen. You find meaning in shared moments. If you prefer a quiet day, you might value independence and self. Your fulfillment comes from within, not from external noise. And if you feel conflicted, stuck between wanting attention and wanting to disappear, maybe you're navigating the tension between needing people and protecting yourself from them. None of these are wrong. Each one tells a story about how you process emotion, time, and self-worth. The key is awareness, because when you understand why you react the way you do, the day starts to hold meaning again, whether it's loud or silent. 9. The deeper mirror. Here's what most people miss. How you treat your birthday often mirrors how you treat your entire existence. Do you rush through life always chasing the next milestone? Do you measure your worth by how others perceive you? Or do you quietly nurture peace even when nobody's watching? Your birthday is one day, but it's also a reflection of something bigger. Some people see celebration, some see emptiness, some see growth. And that reflection can reveal more about your emotional world than you realize. Because if you can't pause for one day to acknowledge your own existence, maybe you've forgotten how to pause at all. 10. The reframe. So here's the truth that no one talks about. The people who treat their birthdays like normal days aren't missing out. They're not broken, they're not cold, they're just people who learned that survival sometimes means lowering expectations. That self-protection sometimes looks like indifference. That peace sometimes requires letting go of what the world says you should want. But here's the invitation. You don't have to perform celebration to deserve it. You don't have to throw a party to matter. You don't have to post about it to make it real. But you also don't have to hide from it, because maybe the real celebration isn't in the candles or the cake or the crowd. Maybe it's in the quiet acknowledgement that you made it another year, that you survived, that you're still here, still learning, still evolving. And that's worth something. Even if no one else notices. Even if you're the only one who knows. Final reflection. So the next time your birthday comes around, pause. Not to post, not to party, but to ask yourself one simple question. Am I living in a way that deserves celebration? Because if you are, then every sunrise becomes a gift. Every moment becomes a candle waiting to be lit. But maybe the people who treat their birthdays like normal days haven't given up on joy. Maybe they've just learned how to find it in places the world doesn't see. In the quiet morning, in the small victory, in the breath between chaos. And maybe that's not sadness. Maybe that's wisdom. Because in the end, birthdays aren't about the day itself. They're about how you choose to exist in all the days in between. And whether you celebrate loudly or live quietly, what matters most is this, that you show up for yourself in whatever way feels true. That's the real celebration. The one that doesn't need an audience. The one that doesn't fade when the candles go out. The one that stays with you long after the date has passed.